Vivek is done. And it's not surprising at all. Ladies and gentlemen, we had the Iowa caucus last night. Not too surprising numbers taking a look. Trump, 51% record margin, kind of expected. He gets 20 delegates. You did have DeSantis beat out Nikki Haley. I don't think it's that important, although it is. If you're Nikki Haley and you were hoping maybe to get like 25 or 26%, DeSantis is at like 13 or 14, maybe DeSantis would consider dropping out before New Hampshire, which is going to be very critical for Haley, although I think it's all anecdotal. Even if Nikki Haley wins New Hampshire, it's not going to matter at all. She just doesn't have the support in the other states to contend with Trump at this point. But that's going to be the narrative going into New Hampshire. Can Nikki Haley actually win it? Her underperforming against DeSantis, that's an issue because she had like a 67% chance to finish in second place. She ends up finishing 2 points behind him. He gets one more delegate than her. Again, this is all anecdotal. None of this I don't think will matter unless something happens with Trump legally to where he cannot run. Trump is just such a massive favorite. And then there is Vivek Ramaswamy getting right around 7.5%, which is basically his polling numbers. I guess there were a few polls that had Vivek at around 5 or 6%, but the thought process, I'm sure he thought he was going to perform a lot better considering the amount of events he was doing. It didn't happen, and he immediately drops out at around 11 o'clock last night and announces that he will be endorsing Donald Trump, which is not surprising. And now the speculation is, will Trump make Vivek his VP? My immediate thought is probably not. I do think Trump is going to go with a woman, probably someone that's younger. There's a few different candidates, a few different choices that I've outlined on who Trump's probably going to choose. Vivek is probably, I'm sure, inside the top three. I saw one betting odds that, that was saying he was the favorite. We'll see what ends up happening. Certainly, he's a very smart young man, but in general, when it comes to an election like this, the writing was on the wall. If you're going to be campaigning that much and you're only getting 7.5%, it's just not going to, it's almost not worth it. You're wasting your own time. And then how about Asa Hutchinson? 0.2%. I don't know how he's still in the race. Chris Christie's already dropped out. And Ryan Binkley. Ryan was actually on my live stream last night trying to sell me. He got 0.7%. Is he even in the race? This is ridiculous, folks. But I think the takeaway here is Nikki Haley, disappointing performance. She's not going to get DeSantis to drop out, which means DeSantis is going to leech votes off of her in New Hampshire. It's going to make it tougher for her to win New Hampshire. And as for DeSantis, I don't think this is really a victory. I mean, his campaign can say, well, we overperformed, we came in second place, right now we're second in terms of delegates. You're still 30 points behind Trump. I mean, if you told me when DeSantis announced he was running, I don't know if you guys remember that whole X thing where he announced with Elon Musk and it was a mess. When he announced, if you were to tell me on that day that he would lose Iowa by 30 points to Trump, I would be like, what an absolute disaster. So this is not a situation like DeSantis would have had to have gotten like 33% for me to be like, okay, maybe DeSantis is actually in this race against Trump like we all thought he would be going into this election cycle. It just hasn't happened. He hasn't been able to get anyone. And now the, never Trump vote is fully with Nikki Haley, and DeSantis is kind of left with the stragglers there at around 21%. Haley and DeSantis are splitting the vote between them, and I'm sure the Haley people want DeSantis to drop out, but DeSantis is just going to say, I outperformed you in Iowa now. Why would I drop out? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe DeSantis stays on until Super Tuesday, which would really be the end of it for Nikki Haley because she needs those DeSantis votes really bad. I don't think all of the DeSantis voters would go to Nikki Haley. I think some of them would go to Trump. It'd be about 70% to Haley and 30% to Trump. And of course, also the other scenario with Vivek dropping out, the 7% or whatever, he was going to get in some of the other states, 3%, 4%, it's all just going to go to Trump. All of the Vivek vote is going to be consolidated with Trump, which is probably going to push him in many of these states around 65, 70% of the overall vote total. So there's basically, I would say at this point, with the situation with DeSantis outperforming Nikki Haley, there's basically 0% chance that Trump is losing really any of these primaries outside of maybe New Hampshire. You could say, well, South Carolina, it's her home state. But if DeSantis is still in the race, it's a big issue for her. And why would DeSantis drop out if he's performing better than her, at least to start in Iowa? But I think everyone expected Trump to get around or a little bit above 50%, and that's exactly what happened, winning basically every county. I think Haley won one of the counties by like 1 vote. Not that that matters at all, but in general, you can see I thought this was a good observation. DeSantis will interpret his second place finish as a reason to keep going, but a path to the nomination is closed off. It absolutely is. You lost by 30 points, dude. I understand, there's going to be like, well, DeSantis overperformed. No, a lot of people thought Nikki Haley was going to come in second. The betting odds were saying it. But still, let's do a big picture look at this. If you were to tell me 5 months ago or 8 months ago that DeSantis would lose Iowa by 30 points, I would be like, wow, something seismic must have changed, because that is a trouncing. And that's exactly what this is. And it just seems like there's just no path for Nikki Haley. DeSantis, obviously with Ramaswamy dropping out, Asa Hutchinson probably dropping out, you would expect, although who knows. My take is that Trump will certainly look for Vivek as for maybe like a cabinet position. Who knows, maybe the VP, but I think there's it's almost like a redundant thing if you take Vivek as your VP. I don't think that's a great strategy. Not that Vivek is parroting everything Trump says, but it's very similar. If you want to appeal more to female voters, well, I guess Vivek is kind of for younger voters, but in general, Trump probably needs to put a female on the ticket with him. That's what their strategists, I'm guessing, are telling him. This is all internal data they're looking at, I'm sure. The stakes for Haley in New Hampshire just went up. I mean, I guess it's all a non-story. I feel like they're writing articles about stuff that just really doesn't matter. Even if she wins New Hampshire, it's all anecdotal. It just doesn't matter. These other candidates do not have the support. Even if DeSantis drops out, it won't matter, because you're going to consolidate votes, but Trump's already over 50%. So it just seems like they need some type of Hail Mary. I guess this is a weird situation now, and I'll throw up the hypothetical. There's basically 3 people in the race with Vivek dropping out. It's Trump, Haley, and DeSantis. Let's say something crazy happens to Trump where he can't run. There's something legally. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I actually think there's like less than a 1% chance that happens. But let's just say, for argument's sake, is it really Haley versus DeSantis? Is that what it comes down to? Would Vivek somehow be able to throw his name back in the ring if something crazy happens to Trump? And at that point, if it is DeSantis versus Haley, would all the MAGA people end up actually turning back and voting for Ron DeSantis? That's another interesting thing to think about. But in general, the only at least semi-surprise, I guess Vivek at 7%, I did think he would at least get to 10% with the amount of campaigning he was doing. And a lot of people, there were people on my stream last night, they were surprised based off of when you look at the sentiment on social media versus real life. Like the sentiment was, oh, he's going to do so well. He's pumping out so much content, going to all these events, live streaming everything. And the sentiment on social media doesn't match up with what actually happens in real life. And a lot of this also is the establishment. They don't like Vivek Ramaswamy. He says a lot of things that make them uncomfortable, and they're going to do what they can to make sure that he doesn't win. And we saw them yesterday with CNN not even including him on the picture. Fox News, it's the same thing. And that's the whole thing with America. It's like we're under the guise of a democracy, but you have these entities operating above us that are kind of, it's like we're all little chickens and they're shooing us into a certain area to go in by showing us propaganda and manipulating our votes. It's interesting how it works out, kind of to look at it from above on how this is being manipulated. But either way, listen, they don't like Trump either, and he won. It is funny looking back at 2016, the critical mistake the establishment made in 2016 was you've got all these people, they all needed to drop out and unite around, I would say, Ted Cruz. This is just revisionist history, but just in general, you look at what the Democratic establishment did with Bernie Sanders in 2020. The dude had a legitimate chance to be the nominee. You've got all these other people, 3%, 4%, 8%, and the establishment tells all these people, drop out immediately, endorse Biden, this is over. And that's what happened. And the Republicans didn't do it in 2016. There was too many people, the vote was split up too much, and it enabled Trump to be the nominee. Don't get me wrong, Trump still had support, but he had a lot less support in 2016 than he does now because he beat Hillary. He's the center of this movement. People are going to vote with him no matter what. It's kind of Trump against the media, and people really thrive off of that and being with Trump. So either way, this is not surprising at all. Donald Trump winning. And it seems like it would be very shocking. You know, who's going to drop out next? I would imagine because DeSantis had a relatively solid showing, DeSantis would hang on until at least Super Tuesday. But, you know, he could drop out at any point, and I don't think it really affects much outside of Haley getting slightly more votes. But with Ramaswamy dropping out, that's going to help Trump as well. Either way, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.